streaming.
Good morning, everyone. On this rainy Friday day, um, how's everyone doing? Hope everyone is good. Uh, Today, we're going to try to wrap up the Industrial Revolution. It's a lot. There's a lot of events that happened over um, about a 100-year period, but about a 70-year period. But I tried to sum it up so that you get the meat of it. Again, you just have to have an understanding. Do you have to memorize all this stuff? No. You just have to know how it's linked together. And when you see questions on the test, they're just going to ask you common sense questions like, can I deduct multiple choice questions? Can I find the best answer? Can I read a graph? Um, Things like that. You generally will see those types of questions. It addressed in that way on the actual test. So what I've done is come up with a sheet of the kind of an overview of what happened during this period of time, and then I've attached actual task study page so that you can see how it's presented, and I hope that's helpful for you to see it that way. So let's get going with that. And I need a new mouse. My mouse, the batteries are dead. So give me one sec there. Come on, y'all. Without the mouse, I'm struggling. Mm. Okay, give me one second, y'all, to pull this up. There we go. Come on. Bear with me. There we go. Okay, so the Industrial Revolution, and this is what I'm calling the quick and dirty. It began in Europe in the mid 1700s. Began in Europe, and it was fueled by improved methods of retrieving coal from mines and the refinement of steel. Uh, there was huge growth in the U.S. and the world with the invention of the cotton gin, which was a machine that made it easier to pull the cotton, to separate the cotton from the seeds, I believe. And so that invention, which happened in the late 1860s, made it so that more cotton could be harvested, shipped to the north, shipped to Europe, and the world exploded. The world exploded. Then they created a thread spinner in which they could make thread more easily, and huge looms in which fabric could be woven more easily. And these looms filled the size of a huge warehouse room. So all of this increased the need for free labor, which, as you know, in this country was enslaved Africans and indentured servants around the world. And so northern cities began to grow because the world became more wealthy. Cloth was more readily available. Um, Buildings began to be built with steel reinforcements in the cities. And so additional labor was welcome. So, what this led to was immigration from Europe between 1870 and 1914. We started first with what were referred to as the old immigrants, and they were from Britain, Ireland, and Germany. And in Ireland, they were fleeing a famine, which means that people were literally starving to death. And then you had later, and the old immigrants, Britain, Ireland, and Germany, were Protestants, were Protestants. and they were Western Europeans. Then the new immigrants came, and they were from this funny part of Europe, that strange part of Europe that we didn't know a whole lot about. They spoke funny languages, they ate different foods, and they were not Protestants. Many of they were Jewish, they were Catholic, um, and Orthodox, and of Orthodox faiths, and they faced um, discrimination when they came. They were different. And then also you have Chinese immigration, which declined during the end of this period due to discrimination. Our government made it, they had a ban on Chinese immigration because they felt, and the Chinese, however, worked the lowest paying jobs prior to these other immigrants, other than that of enslaved Africans. They worked the lowest paying jobs, but then when times got tough, everyone wanted that work. And so they began to blame the economy on the Chinese and discriminate. Work was segmented by ethnicity, by where you came from. The old immigrants were given better work with higher wages, while Blacks, Italians, and Jews, Blacks and Italians were given the most menial work with less pay. European Jews worked in clothing, and it was really segmented by who you were. And people lived in communities where they had support with from one another, with businesses, with being able to have some of the foods that they had that were part of their old culture, their religion, where they had things in common. During this time, the poor lived in the cities near their jobs because they had no means of transportation. How, is that different from today? And the cities became crowded, unsanitary, disease ridden. Animals walked down the streets, animals used the bathroom in the streets because horses were the mode of transportation. They actually dumped sewage right into the street, and then it contaminated the water. And people drank that, and they started having diseases like cholera. Um, Again, as I said earlier, each group was segregated by neighborhood and had specialized work. And they had also supports built into their communities, but due to discrimination, Blacks at this time had in the cities had only their churches for support, um, where which is where people came for socialization, where they came for social services. Uh, and then you had service workers who lived between the city and the suburbs, often living above their business until they could buy a home. And they had money for leisure, money to play with, money to take a vacation with. They became the middle class. During this time, women worked outside the home, even middle class women, because they had to. However, because they were women, they worked for lower wages and in what they called pink collared positions, which were specifically for women. Which meant that you might have worked in the button factory, or you may have been, well, not a housekeeper if you were middle class, but those kinds of jobs. And in a middle class family, the girls would typically go to work, the boys would go to college. And you saw this a lot in the South with middle class people. Work hours were generally over 12 hours. Um, the middle class began to grow. And if you were a white American born man, you were the most prosperous in society. Has that really changed? Children worked, particularly poor children, in dangerous environments for long hours, many times getting hurt or getting killed. This was something that horrified people, that children had to work. However, children of the enslaved had always worked and in life threatening conditions. Um, then, when we look at um, how certain people became the 1%, this was the legacy of the 1%. Came generally with the invention of the steam engine, which was used in factories, in trains, any place you needed a steam engine, they were put in and they just changed everything. This is where we really became industrialized. And steam engines are still used today in trains. In fact, over 150 years, trains still run pretty much the same way. And at this time, too, products could be easily transported without being damaged, without the waste, without theft. You know, prior to that, it was probably by horseback. Then there were certain people who became rich from unscrupulous practices, and their names are impactful today. We call them robber barons. Well, you know what a baron is. That's someone of great wealth and influence in society, but robber barons. And I'll tell you, someone that you see every day, perhaps, if you watch CNN. Oh God, I just forgot his name. I'll get back to him. The robber barons, the first one's name was Andrew Carnegie, and he um, would have a product and he would buy out every business tied to his product to control the price. He would put everyone else out of business. So then he was the only producer and he could set the price for his product. That practice is still being done today, but it is illegal. Then John Rockefeller lowered a price on his product, lower, 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 till no other businesses can compete. Then he would buy them out at a loss. This practice still goes on today. It's illegal, but it's done. And there are powerful people on Wall Street that do this with companies today. And then they buy the companies, they buy the infrastructure up cheap. They'll buy the building, they'll buy the equipment, they'll change the name on the business. This is why we've lost some of our stores in our malls today. The stores you're used to seeing, the businesses you used to see, they're gone forever. Same practices today. So during this time, unions began to organize labor against unsafe and lethal labor practices, long work hours, and child labor. People were dying. There were fires in factories, and the doors were locked. People would lose limbs. People would die very often, and they had no protections. Also against the wages, they couldn't complain. They had nowhere to go. Some of these unions discriminated against women, blacks, and other minorities of the time. Workers sometimes organized strikes or walk-offs and were killed. Would often face deadly retaliation from wealthy company owners. However, what we see today, an 8-hour workday and a 5-hour work week, came from some of these labor actions. Then, as you get to the end of this period, the early 1900s brought sweeping social change for European minorities who would be considered white in later years. It became the progressive area. However, for people of color, they weren't the beneficiaries of these changes. So that is really it. And you have an assignment from the task to guide, and you also have the answers attached. Let me show you. Let me show you my question sheet that I have for you. And as I said, the answers are attached to this sheet. I'm not going to go through this with you because this is your work. Oh, that's pretty. It's all upside down. Okay. I thought I had. There we go. These are your questions, and there are 6 questions. This is from the task practice exam. The first question is, which of the following always occurs during a period of rapid industrialization? Number A, letter A, the annexation of new territory. Letter B, an increase in manufacturing, C, an increase in population, or D, an increase in immigration. So when we talk about industrialization in the industry, what do you think would happen if you have rapid industry? Second question, what event contributed to the growth of American industries in the mid 1800s? Then what you have to do is go back to the sheet I've given you and answer the question. What I want you to do is take a look and answer those questions. Tell me how you do. You have the answers, and that's it for today. So again, I've given you the notes. You also have the prior lesson about farming, and you have that 19-minute video. If you watch that 19-minute video, you will know all you need to know. It will cement the entire period of time for you in your mind. So if you need to take a look at that video again from the prior lesson before you look at this, go ahead and do that. And that's all we have for today. If you have any questions, as always, please reach out to me. And if you have, oh, I cut myself off. Okay.
Ok, perfecto. So, lo que él necesita traer con él es su fuente de ingresos de más, si es un Princeton es más reciente. Él tiene como su licencia, un foro allí o algo así.
All right.
Ajá.